Hello and welcome to Exploring the Culture and Beauty of Scotland. I'm Sabrina Allison and I will be taking you on this introductory tour of Scotland. I have a company called Discover Glasgow and I organise internships for students, homestays, cultural activities and also digital learning. I've lived in Scotland since 1990, so I've seen it develop over that time and got to visit lots of places and really get to know the culture and call it home. So even though I started life in America and I still have a US passport, if someone asks where I'm from, I say Scotland. So you have a lot of choices of how to spend your time on this summit. So I wanted to show you, to begin with, why Scotland. There are many reasons, but this is just a handful. So one is that Scotland has been recognized through various publications and surveys as being really welcoming and friendly, and we're interested in other cultures and just let people be themselves, and we're quite open. And Glasgow especially has been called the friendliest city in the world a few times. We have stunning landscapes around the Highlands and Lowlands. And you're allowed to just walk anywhere, not right up next to somebody's house and not to leave any rubbish. But for recreational purposes, you can use other people's land, which is quite nice. And we have masses of land. You wouldn't be doing that in cities because, countryside. Also, there are lots of different themes you could explore while you're here. You could be looking at history, you could be looking at culture, food and drink. We have loads of distilleries that are all really interesting and different from each other. Art, lots of different things you could be looking at, and of course walking holidays or some other sort of activity break. We have masses of cultural activities. There are festivals and museums and just loads of places to go and different cultural things to do. So that was something that really hit me when I first came here, is how much emphasis there was on cultural stuff. Even neighborhood festivals, loads of them. Also, obviously, being an English-speaking country, that makes it more accessible to people from potentially all over the world, common language, but cool accents. Not mine. I don't have a Scottish accent unless I'm certain places they think it's Scottish, but not compared to real Scottish accents, which are quite varied, but lovely. And an extra bonus, Scotland features in a lot of films. So there are a lot of historical films, but there's also the likes of Avengers, Infinity Wars, Harry Potter, of course, James Bond, Skyfall, and then there are things that were a location, Outlander, another big Scottish one. But Indiana Jones has filmed in Glasgow as being New York. So if you come here, you might spot places that you've seen in films or in films you watch when you go home. Also, there are lots of Scottish bands that you might not realize are Scottish. So things that are familiar that you can take with you or study up on before you come. So before kind of going further, I wanted to just get some geographical perspective of where Scotland is. So we are on the edge of Europe. There's Iceland that didn't fit on the screen, but which is further northwest. But generally, we're on the edge, which means both that we're near, because we have loads of cheap flights to other European countries, and also we've had lots of people moving to Scotland, studying Scotland, people who've lived in other countries and come back. So we're used to other cultures. But because we're on the edge, we're kind of honored when people have come this far. So I think that makes us extra welcoming. And also being a kind of former seafaring country, it's been more about proactive travel than just having people passing through, I guess. So that's where we are. And getting a closer look here, you can see that we are part of the UK. This is a little corner of Ireland. There is Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the rest is the Republic of Ireland. So that would be the British Isles. And you can see in the first picture at the very top is Shetland, which is part of Scotland, but it's halfway between Scotland and Norway. And when I did my other screenshot to get close enough to get the faint little border there with England, Shetland didn't fit. So keep in mind that it's there in spirit. So you can see we've got a third of the landmass actually of the UK between here, England and Wales is this little edge. But we've actually only got 8% of the population of the UK. There's a tiny percent in Northern Ireland and in Wales. They also have lots of countryside, but England is the bulk, 84% of the population. So they're much more densely populated. We have lots and lots of countryside. And you can also see from the map lots of mountains. So we've got some really dramatic countryside, which is just stunning. Here you can see the central belt of Scotland and how close it is to the Highlands. In fact, this little triangular bit is Loch Lomond. And you can see how part of it has mountains around it and part is more flat. And there's a distillery called Glengoyne, which is over on this side. And it counts as being a Highland whiskey because the distillery is in the Highlands, but across the street where the warehouses are is actually the Highlands. So it's just over here. But this bit that's kind of flatter is called the Central Belt because that's the skinny bit, like a waist of the country. Waist with an I. And you can get from Glasgow to Edinburgh in less than an hour by public transport. About the same by car, depending on where you're going, if it's not rush hour traffic. And even from one edge to the other edge of the Central Belt, if you went all the way down to Ayr and up to Dundee, that's only 2 hours. So this is all really accessible and there's a lot of public transport. It's really easy to get around. If you're going into Glasgow or Edinburgh, it's depending on where you're going, but it's a lot easier to use public transport than to try to navigate with a car because there are a lot of new policies to encourage people to use public transport. So one-way systems, things blocked off, it's not easy to drive around. So in these areas, I recommend public transport. In the Highlands, there are places you need a car. So the Central Belt has 70% of the population. So there are a lot of cultural things that have loads of people visiting them here. But that means the rest of the country, which we'll look at again in a second, only has 30% of the population. So all of these southern uplands, they're called, and the Highlands and Islands and Shetland that's off the map, very spacious. So that is all really pretty, but easy to get around down here. And there is public transport around there as well. So you may hear discussions about independence or not. It's very complicated. There are lots of pros and lots of cons, and they're all mixed together. But the kind of most essential consideration is that there's only 8% of the vote in UK votes comes from Scotland. So even if we all vote the same thing and England votes something else, then our vote doesn't do anything. So that's kind of the central reason for that. But we're looking at visiting. So this is a bit of Scotland's devolved independence. We've always had, even going back to the Union of Parliaments, the Act of Union in 1706, Scotland had its own legal system, education system, and banks, and we've kept those. So we still have those different systems. But from 1706 until 1999, we didn't have a parliament. So there was a referendum in 97, and I think 80% of people voted, and 80% of them said, yes, we want a parliament. So this is what we ended up with. It's very cool. This architect who designed it, like any public building, there was a lot of consultation and changing minds and the budget going up, but it is nonetheless cool. And you can go in. So there's an exhibition area and a cafe on the ground floor when you go in, and in the exhibition area you just say, hi, I would like tickets, and they're free, and they say, yep, here you go, and you go upstairs. So all these people you see at the top level, they're just members of the public watching the discussion. The voting that leads to the members of Scottish Parliament is proportional representation to try to make sure nobody's vote's wasted. And as of last year, any legal resident can vote in Scottish elections. So I now get to vote, Scottish and local elections. And that also means you have jury duty, but fair enough. So that's a cool place to visit that costs you nothing when you're in Edinburgh. So a bit about the Scottish character that you don't necessarily hear about. This is a Scottish version of the UK coat of arms. You've got the lion is England, even though there's also lions on the Scottish bit of the flag. And the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland. We have Nessie, why not a unicorn? So the unicorn and the lion and the elephant and probably the dragon were considered really powerful animals. And so this looks quite equal as it was signed up to be. And the horn of the unicorn was said to convey purity and innocence. So if the unicorn dipped his horn in a pond that wasn't very nice, he could purify it for all the other animals. So this conveys helping others and kind of sense of community there, which is something that Scotland today has a lot of. And you could say that unicorns require a bit of imagination because we don't get to see them very much in everyday life. And imagination is also something that Scotland is very into. So there is your little introduction of that. Scotland's character flowing from that, community-minded. We have local festivals, social enterprises, free museums, our tax system. Scots were consulted about this, did they want it? And they said, yeah, people who earn less should pay less and people who earn more should gradually pay more. So we do. Also, we have free university. Used to also be free to EU residents or citizens when we were part of the EU. And we have free prescriptions. If you're here as a visitor and you need to go to a doctor or the hospital, that's also free. So there's kind of not a way to charge you for that, which is really nice. We pay taxes for it, but it means you don't have to think, do I need this or not? Also, I mentioned imagination and creativity. This is a big thing here. There are a lot of inventions that were created by Scottish people. Some weren't living in Scotland at the time, but the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell was in the US, but he was from here. The TV, the refrigerator, using antiseptic and anesthetic in surgery, the steam engine, which made it possible to travel across oceans. Somebody else in England invented the steam engine, but it didn't go very far. So someone in Glasgow refined it, so it kind of recycled the power, so it lasted much longer. Putting pedals on bicycles so they're easier to control. There are a lot of bands, festivals. 3 of our 7 cities are UNESCO creative cities. Glasgow is a city of music, Edinburgh is a UNESCO city of literature, and Dundee is a UNESCO city of design. So that's quite a good percentage. We have lots of museums. Even in small towns, you'll find museums. So we're really, really, really into culture and imagination and creativity. And I think Scottish people just have a lot of creative energy, which is partly why they are friendly and love to talk and meet new people. So very welcoming, friendly, helpful. And Rough Guide readers voted Glasgow in 2014 and 2021 the friendliest city in the world, and Time Out in their index in 2022 found Glasgow the same, the friendliest. And the European Commission also said that Glasgow was the top in all of Europe for openness, tolerance, and trust. But Time Out's guide also said that Edinburgh is really open to people being themselves and expressing themselves, and that it's also really friendly. So very much into friendliness. Probably people in the Highlands with fewer people around, they're like interested, but not quite as overtly chatty as city dwellers, but still welcoming. So if you have all these friendly people, how do you interact with them? This is where our practical tips kick in. So in the British Isles as a whole, Ireland included, the pub is a social center. So it's not all about drinking. You can go there and have soft drinks, but the reason people go is it's like a bonus living room. If you want to have loud music and dance and not chat, they're nightclubs for that. But pubs are more sitting and chatting. So if you're in a pub and you're up at the bar, and it's not that you're queuing, but people are standing there, those are the people who are just open to chatting with anyone. People sitting at tables probably more likely to be having their own conversation. So just chat with people and you can see how friendly they are. Another way you can interact with friendly Scottish people and get to know them is to stay at a homestay. Because we are welcoming and friendly, there are a lot of homestays, and they can be good value as well as an opportunity to get to know locals. So they can eat dinner with you and give you tips about where it's good to go and generally make you feel at home while you're here. So you can stay with several of them if you're touring around Scotland. Another way to interact with the locals, and this is something Glasgow's famous for, it may well work in other parts of Scotland, but it's said that if you, and I know many people have done this, if you stand in a shopping street and you're holding a map and looking like you might need help, then someone will stop and ask if you need help, and they might actually walk you to where you want to go. I've heard various occasions, including from my dad when he was visiting, that somebody offered help and then walked back the direction they'd come from and said, oh yeah, I was just on my way there anywhere, I'll take you. So really nice, friendly people. Don't try this next to a train station at rush hour. No one will stop for you. And if the weather is really horrendous, it's only if they're taking pity on you that they won't be helping. But normally they're quite helpful. So moving on to places. Scotland is very much like I kind of pointed out with the maps before. You've got the lowlands and you've got the highlands. And they're very different vibes because the lowlands have lots of people and the highlands have hardly any people. So the way of life is very different, and the scenery is very different. The transport's different, and the landscape's different. So this is kind of a sample of some nice places. You've got Glencoe, the view from Oban, which is the seafood capital of Scotland and the gateway to the Inner Hebrides, the Western Isles. This is Skye. They're actually mountains off the edge of the hexagon. This is Inverness Castle, and this is a cute Highland cow. You can get some Highland cows in the Lowlands, and Pollock Country Park in Glasgow has its own herd of Highland cows, but generally they're a very Highland thing. So you can just pick different places around the Highlands and it'll be stunning wherever you go. There are lochs. I think this counts as a loch, or maybe it's just a bay, but there are two kinds of lochs in Scotland. There's ordinary lakes that are just fresh water, and then there are sea lochs, which go into the sea. So they're kind of a mix of salt and fresh water. Some interesting places to go I mentioned in pictures. If you're driving along the north coast, the most remote bit, without going to any islands, is the North Coast 500. So that's 500 miles you can drive along with amazing landscapes. And if you're walking just outside Glasgow in Milngavie, all the way up to Fort William, which is next to Ben Nevis, which is the tallest mountain in Scotland. It might take you a week. Some people do it in 5 days. Make sure you have comfortable shoes, or you can just do pieces of it. Some of the pieces have train stations at either end, so you don't even have to camp. So that is a really scenic thing to think about doing as well. And Culloden is a battlefield that's near Inverness. And if you didn't know what it was, it would look like a field. But if you do, you can really feel, especially if you've watched the first series of Outlander, second, you can feel what it was like in this battle where Scotland might have had its independence again, but it all went terribly badly and they were quite punished for 100 years until, fortunately, Queen Victoria really liked Scotland, and her husband was also into Scotland, and she made it cool to wear tartans again, but they were forbidden for a while. So Culloden, very atmospheric and handy for Inverness. You can get a bus over there from Inverness. So these are some places to think about going, but you could just wander and see where you end up. You'll find wonderful places wherever you go. So the cities, as I mentioned, we have 7 cities. This is a little sample. This is Edinburgh Castle with a nice fountain below it. Buchanan Street in Glasgow, we have Glasgow University that looks like a castle, but I didn't want to give you nothing but castles. I think this is a bit of Stirling Castle. I'm not sure what that is now. And this is Dundee, which has its new design museum, which is Victoria and Albert connected to the one in London, but all about design, City of Design. And this is the Royal Research Ship Discovery that went to Antarctica 100 or so years ago. And that's also very interesting. So we have lots and lots and lots of things to do in cities. Castles, museums, cathedrals, shopping, restaurants, lots of parks and gardens, art galleries, street arts, lots of different trails to check out different things. If you're in Edinburgh, there's Harry Potter trails. You've got 2 different art trails in street art, like murals, and also just other interesting kind of outdoor art in Glasgow. And there are 2 different trails also in Dundee. Shopping, obviously, music, pubs, lots and lots to do in cities. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background about Scottish food and drink, because you can find those all around Scotland. Things made in Scotland. We obviously drink plenty of other things as well. Our national drink is whiskey. There are loads of distilleries around Scotland and loads of new ones, actually. And because of the new ones, we also have lots of gin, because whiskey, to be proper Scotch whiskey, has to mature for 3 years and a day at least, which is not very profitable when you're setting up a new whiskey company. So what people do is they also make gin. While the whiskey's maturing, the gin only takes about a day to make, maybe 2, and then it's ready to sell. So that's way better for cash flow. So we have lots of gin recently and lots of whiskey distilleries. We have our second national drink is called Iron Brew, and it's fizzy and very sweet, slightly like cream soda, but with a kind of iron edge to it. And it has traditionally lots of caffeine and sugar, though you now get diet Iron Brew as well. Good for hangovers, apparently. Not my taste, but I'm happy to have Iron Brew flavored ice cream. Down here, you can't see very well, this is craft beer. We also have lots of craft beers. And the one up here is a soft drink that I particularly like called Rapscallion Dry Lime. So they're various soft drink makers as well. On the food side, it's very interesting. We have a few traditional things. So haggis is the national dish. It's eaten on the day that we celebrate the national poet's birthday, with tatties and neeps, mashed potatoes and turnips. But haggis is being used in other things now as well. Cullen skink is kind of like clam chowder but smoked. Cranachan has lots of nice Scottish ingredients: oats, cream, honey, berries, and whiskey. And then we have oatcakes and smoked salmon. And then we have all this nice ingredients, produce that gets exported, but we keep our berries as well. But newer food is from other cultures. We have lots of nice curries, yum, 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 and Italian food, because we have a lot of people from or of lineage from India, also Pakistan and Italy. But we're also using haggis in creative new ways, like in pakoras or pizzas. There's pakoras. And just doing lots of things with local ingredients. Small plates is a big thing, and being flexible for different diets like gluten-free and vegan things. So themes that you might explore: film locations, histories, castles, and how to save money. Always good. We have masses of free museums, trails obviously free, scenery very free, homestays I've mentioned. There's a company called It Is On that will give you deals on hotels and food. You can get a Spirit of Scotland travel pass that will cover you for a week or 2 around Scotland with all the different types of transport. And you can also get passes to Historic Scotland or National Trust for Scotland, which mean you buy that in advance and you go to all the different cool places you come across. And if you feel brave, you can wild camp free, but that means you've got to have a car to transport your stuff, or walk, but it's a bit exhausting. So times to come. January, we have Celtic Connections Festival in Glasgow, and Hogmanay is actually December, but kind of running into January. April, May, ideal camping and no midges to bite you, and it gets very green, which is lovely. June, we have really long hours of daylight, which are really good for exploring because you can see more. And July and August, you've got festivals in August in Edinburgh. Everything's open, but the prices are higher there. And August especially, the hotels get a bit full. The autumn, you've got in October and September, heather on the hills goes pink, and then you've got the autumn leaves, and then December, Christmas. So lots of things to come for. And I hope that you've been inspired. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch. So thank you very much, and happy unlimited traveling.